Okay, are my scripts licensed? They are free. I mean, they have been like free to use for a long time, and for the last few years, I also let's see, when was that? 2 years ago, right? Actually, yeah, almost exactly 2 years ago. I sort of formally, they were free to use anyway before that, but I formally open sourced these scripts as as open source, and it's and actually people sometimes asked about it. Like, hey, they wanna distribute scripts internally in their corporation. What are the rules? And they're all free to use. Just look into their license, and it's Apache license, so you can change them, do whatever you want pretty much, as long as you keep the headers around, right? Okay, so without SQL monitoring, what is the most reliable way to get the SQL duration and for a parallel query? If you cannot use Ash or SQL Monitor, right? If you can use Ash, let me start from that. If you can use Ash, then I'll paste that. So if you can use Ash, but you don't have SQL monitoring, but you can use Ash, then you can use ASQLman, because ASQLman can actually give you like if you want to get breakdown, you can actually take a SQL ID of a parallel query. You would currently have to add a where clause into the script, say that, hey, monitor only this user or monitor only this SQL execution ID, and it will tell you how many seconds were spent on different lines of the plan. So these numbers, what you see here, they come from the same. So this information you see here comes from Ash. And similarly, it's the same column, the activity column. This comes from Ash. So my script, ASQLman, wherever it is, it queries the same Ash column. So you can actually go back, if you have Ash history going back like 30 days, you can go back to last week and query specific SQL ID. You would currently have to add a where clause here to monitor only one specific SQL execution, but this works for parallel queries as well. So that's one option. I pasted this as an answer, but another option is how you know how you run this. If you are in development mode, or if you are in a position to add a gather plan statistics hint, maybe as a patch or something, or let me actually do it like this. So let's say that this is a problem query. I know the SQL ID is this, and I cannot add this hint manually. Then as a DBA, I can say create SQL patch for this SQL ID and add a gather plan statistics hint. I just created a SQL patch and I injected a hint into this query. When somebody runs this query again, if the query is already running ongoing, then it will not modify existing queries, right? So, and let me just run. I run the original query now, right? Without any modification. And now if I'm the DBA, I can say, okay, so select star from table, dbms expand display cursor. Let's go to the library cache, read the exact cursor. Let me see which child. We use the child number 1 here. And normally I use all stats last, right? But this is a parallel query. I'm stupid. So did I do the wrong? Yeah, I did the SQL patch for a wrong one. So let me just drop SQL patch. Let me just do it once more. I'm gonna get rid of everything just to start from scratch. So this is my query. It runs in parallel. This is the SQL ID. And now as a DBA, let me create the SQL patch for this SQL ID whenever anybody runs it again, right? So if I show you all SQL IDs, all child cursors for this SQL ID right now, I only have one child, right? But since I created the SQL patch, if I rerun this now, then you see now I have I wonder if okay, now I have two child cursors. I'm not sure why it didn't show up immediately. Maybe the cursor was cached. I'm not going to try to troubleshoot it right now. But anyway, now I have two child cursors. So, and when I, as a DBA, I can say, okay, show me this plan as I usually do for serial queries. And wrong SQL ID, of course. So I better look into the correct SQL ID. Okay, you see a new child was used, and you see a SQL patch was used as well. See, we're using child number 1 now, not 0, right? And thanks to that, now we have, thanks to the SQL patch, we have this stats gathering enabled. You see, now we have the actual, the total runtime of this query, 0.15 seconds, and we get number of buffer gets and stuff like that. But if I look into an actual, let's say, index fast full scan, let me actually take the first one. So this is where the execution really starts from, but index full scan. How come is the buffers 0 for the index full scan? And the answer is that when you look into parallel queries, you cannot use all stats last. This will only show you whatever was the last session who updated metrics for this SQL ID. And in my case, the last session is the query coordinator when it finishes, right? I should use all stats all. So because this will include all executions, also the slave numbers. You see, the total runtime as reported here is still 0.15. Why do we see numbers bigger than numbers here? There are different hacking sessions for there, but now we see all the totals. Unfortunately, these numbers are cumulative in the sense that if people keep running the same query again, 3 times, you see, now the buffer gets is 33, or it was 33, and now when I report it again, it's gonna report 99. Because that's what all stats all does. It actually doesn't report the last execution of any session. It reports cumulative totals of all sessions, whole parallel slaves across all executions. So that's unfortunate, but it still shows you better than nothing. If you don't have licenses for the real thing, the awesome Oracle tools, right? And when you experiment with things, you can always ask the developer, say that, add like, I don't know how I usually do it myself when I experiment. I just say my test 1, or I put my name here so it's easier to find tunnel 1, tunnel 2. Now all these queries have a separate SQL ID, well, I would have to have the SQL patch here though, or I will ask the user to gather, add this, or enable SQL trace, because when you enable SQL trace, then it automatically enables this as well. I don't even have to look into the trace file. I still get these numbers. Okay, so let's say, okay, I have 12 minutes until it's 3 o'clock here. So I guess I'll just, let's do it like this. I'll go on for 12 more minutes and then we're done. So is there a hacking session available? I talked about this. I talked about this problem. How come we have a bigger number here under a child of a plan if the parent root that should contain all the time is smaller? So where does it come from? So there is a problem, performance related thing. What comes because it shows up because of this, right? And a metrics issue. I think if you look into I certainly talk about it in my training, but if you go to the videos, then these are old videos with a crappier resolution compared to now. So SQL execution hacking session, right? I'm gonna go very deep there, obviously, again, or I did go very deep, and I probably talk about that issue, right? And I'm sure Jonathan Lewis has blogged about it and so on. Okay. And I have scripts create SQL patch and drop SQL patch, and I have the same for baselines. I haven't done the outlines, the profiles yet, because you use profiles less nowadays. But SQL patches are around since Oracle 11.2 or 11.1, I think. So you can also attach, if you want to attach a hint or a few, and don't really want to fix baselines or anything, fix plans, then that's what you can use. Starting from Oracle 11.2 or 12, I think. All right, so there are more questions coming in, so I'll scroll upwards. Otherwise, I'll just stay in the bottom. Okay, so I'll just ask, please elaborate for one question. I didn't fully understand that, or maybe I'm just moving too fast. Okay. How can we get flame graphs without having direct access to the machine or console? So it's you got to spool something, because if you look into SQL Flame, I mean, what I do is, you see, I spool, I run how I generate the flame graphs. I'm querying $$ SQL plan, you see, $$ SQL plan statistics. That's where the data comes from. And then I spool the output into a file, and then I run this script by Brendan Gray, which generates this flame graph, right? So if you can spool and somebody can email you such a file, then you're good. And similarly, if you look into the SQL script, basically what it does is it selects an Oracle report from here. So this is an Oracle function, and all I do is I spool to this file, and then I open it. So I spool the HTML report that Oracle creates into an HTML file, right? So if somebody can send this to you over email, you can use it. So you don't need direct connection. Do you have one single script to collect all the SQL stats information like Oracle supports SQLT? Nope. And the SQLT and I'll say Mauro Pagano's SQL D360. I just to answer one question, you'll see it. You can just query. So I don't have a script like that because people have already written better ones, right? One script what I haven't really talked about yet, other than in my training, is also this. I'm gonna not do it in parallel, but I have something called Explain Better. Explain Better is wider output. It shows you much more information. It's very wide, so I'm not sure if it's better for all uses, but SQL monitoring obviously is, because it uses SQL monitoring source, is awesome. But this doesn't need SQL monitoring, and it does a lot of calculations and filter. It does a lot of information and stuff for you, and it also computes the self time of a plan line from the cumulative ones. But since Oracle has this problem that we discussed, then some numbers will look negative. So this is not a bug with my script. It's how Oracle sometimes miscalculates this for performance reasons. It doesn't measure everything. It samples some info. So anyway, so that was one of my scripts that I'll make noise about. Okay, so What else? Can you add multiple hints in the same line with SQL patch? Yes. You can just say you know, you basically just say this. Or something like that, or you know, opt param abc dc, right? Something like that. So, but when you run, so there already is such a patch. So I would have to come on. With such a name, so now I can create one. So, but when you run this query, you would have to make sure that that the notes section will actually say that it's that the patch was used, right? Anyway, so I have a script called other XML which reads the other XML section, and this is where the notes are. You know, SQL patch was used, adaptive plan is yes, and then and so on. And this stuff here, this is the this helps to display the adaptive plans in a more human-friendly fashion. So, and my script called XB actually uses this. If explain better. There's quite a lot of you know, work I needed to do for this. Anyway, so what else? That's it. And Hari, you had a if you're still logged in, you had a very good point. You know, with SQL monitoring, you know, if SQL monitoring threshold, you see, SQL monitoring, if you don't use a SQL monitoring hint, and if it's not a parallel query, then SQL monitoring kicks in only after 5 seconds of not the total runtime, but CPU and IO time. So if you use a monitor hint, it kicks in immediately. And if you use a parallel query, it kicks in immediately, even without a hint, right? But if it's a serial query, then you need 5 seconds of CPU and or IO time to be consumed before the statement is monitored. And the reason is, you know, you don't want to monitor all statements, all short ones, because you know, what if you're running some queries tens of thousands of times per second in your big server? You don't want to constantly copy every execution's info into some log. You know, it's going to take a lot of overhead and a lot of latching and memory and so on. So you only want to monitor long-running things, and you don't want to monitor, you know, you may have a update statement. It's a very quick and small update statement, but it will end up waiting for a lock. And when you wait for a lock, or the other option is that, you know, your you know, you have a log writer problem, and you have, or actually, yeah, archiving needed, or you have a DB writer problem, or you know, you have a log file switch checkpoint incomplete, and now you have 1,000 sessions who all are waiting for this. You don't want SQL monitoring to kick in here, because you don't want 1,000 sessions suddenly show up in SQL monitoring. And when you wait for a lock, or when you wait for log file switch, this is not the SQL tuning problem. You know, that's a different problem. It will show up in Ash, and you have to fix it by, you know, fixing your IO problem or whatever, right? So basically that means that that's why SQL monitoring only kicks in when it's 5 seconds of CPU or IO time. So when you wait for a lock, so essentially when I look into wait classes in wait events, when you wait for when you are on CPU, or when you wait for user IO, you know, 5 seconds in total, then SQL monitoring kicks in. But when you wait for some sort of resource manager or you know, something else, then SQL monitoring doesn't kick in, right? Although the statement queuing, I think it's when statements are queued, I don't even remember whether they show up or not. So that may be a bit special. All right. So as promised, I'm gonna finish now because otherwise it will be blabbing for way too long. If there is something you want me to still answer, there may well be. Either tweet to me or email to me. But the contact is here, right? So, and yeah, so as I said on the first slide, so I will soon announce I'll do a hacking session about Oracle hinting as well. I'm sure it's going to end up 3 hours again. So again, I just want to move some of this deep, very very narrow topics, but which can get very tricky and complex. I want to move some things out of my training, so I could, the training would be more had a better flow about actually fixing more SQL problems, and just some things have to go. See you either on 2nd of June, or if you decide to sign up for my classes, then see you later. And in September we're gonna rerun the virtual conference as well.